there's a structure in the Buddha Dharma, or the truth that Buddha taught, a structure that has been used for a long time. I don't know where it came from originally, it goes way back. Of the three jewels, the Buddha as the example of someone who was, I like to say, sane, or no longer at war, or had deep understanding of what our situation was here as human beings, what life was about fundamentally. And then the Dharma, so the Buddha, the Dharma, the first two. The Dharma is the truth that he taught, and since this is a cumulative tradition, not a revealed spiritual path, there are different interpretations. Other religions do that too, but Buddhism is known for being cumulative. The works of Vasubandhu, or Asanga, or Dogen Zenji, for that matter, in the 13th century, writing the Shobogenzo, and the Eihei Koroku, or the extensive record, which is another very large collection of writings of his. And so these are sometimes extensions, elaborations, interpretations of the basic teaching of the Buddha. And so you have the not only the relationship to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, is the relationship to the historical Buddha, reading the Agamas, or the early teachings of the Buddha, but also, reading and studying other teachings down through the centuries, which we do here quite a bit. Right now, eight, maybe 9, including the one that Bruce teaches. Bruce is teaching out of a work by Longchenpa. So what I'm getting at is the Buddha, the historical Buddha, and also that shows up, that same dynamic, those three dynamics, that one shows up also as the teaching person themselves, which in this case it would be this person, but also it could be any time that you may be functioning in that way when someone asks you about the Buddha Dharma, or asks you about the teaching. It's not that you're the Buddha, you have some kind of direct insight into that, but your understanding is probably quite a bit more clear than someone who is just working with their preconceptions. So and we can talk about any of those three, but the one that I want to focus on, concentrate on, is the Sangha, or the third jewel. And this is the community of people who are studying the Dharma under the guidance of not only the Buddha's teaching, who is long gone, long passed away. You can't ask the Buddha any questions. So this situation here doesn't present itself. I'm not presenting myself as some kind of equal of the Buddha, or even a spokesman for the Buddha particularly. So I'm coming out of my understanding of what the Buddha taught, my understanding of what my teachers taught me, and endeavoring to present that to you in such a way that you could begin to work with your passion, aggression, ignorance, your basic confusion, delusion, starting with the provisional teachings of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 12 links, the various realms, states of mind, and so on. Very simple, but complicated. And so what I want to emphasize is how important, quite often, the three jewels is kind of missed. Quite often what just happens is someone just reads about the Dharma, gets taken with it, or enamored of that, and doesn't have the help of a teaching person. They don't have a teacher. Perhaps they don't want one, and that should be up to them. So this is not a sales pitch about anything. And then the other thing is quite often missing is the Sangha. And the interesting thing about the Sangha is these are people who are bringing their own confusion, their suffering, their difficulty about life and about the world, and they're, just to characterize it a little bit, who knows? I mean, we come from so many different ways. I've often said that I would like to have stumbled out of this high school over here into this place rather than into 4 years in the Marine Corps. I had 4 years in the Marine Corps. I'm not saying that was horrible, and there was a lot to learn there. I see the thumbs up in the back. So there's a lot to learn, and a tremendous amount to learn, but also it was a really all based on control and on aggression and on obeying and basically basically getting you to, knocking you down, especially in the Corps. They knocked you down as far as they could, and then they started complimenting you, bringing you up as a Marine, or as a, you working on your sense of pride. It works. It's a good way to do that. And then you have the esprit de corps, or the spirit of a unit, and that's what makes it run. Those people are put in a situation where there is a strong threat. Then you have as it says in the movie, the band of brothers, a band of sisters, for that matter. So they get together and they're not thinking about the flag. They're not thinking about who's right, who's wrong. They're thinking about protecting their friend or their friends, and it's so powerful that people give their lives to save other people just on the spot, on the moment. Kind of a organic bodhisattva. And so what I want to emphasize about our situation, or a situation in general, somewhat generality, but it's just how important the community part of it is, and how important it is to. You'll notice a difference. You'll notice that if you're practicing this, and you'll notice that if you talk to anyone who is not practicing this, there's a whole different dynamic about the way they look at the world, the way they work with the world. It's a very subtle area where there is a belief or a grasping at a self and a grasping at other. I'm this, they're that, and that's very, very strong. Whereas people who are meditators, they're doing that somewhat, but it's less. There's just less. There's less kind of what we call arrogance, or there's much less confidence about right and wrong, or who's right, who's wrong. We're kind of more apt to give people the benefit of the doubt about where they're coming from, even if you haven't really understood or aren't able to explain dependent origination to yourself, let alone to someone else. You have an idea what that is. When it is said that everything is dependent on everything else for its singularity, its so-called apparent separation. The best example that I've used this probably dozens, if not hundreds of times, is go look in the mirror and ask yourself, what are you responsible for here? Not much, maybe your haircut. But you're not responsible for the basis situation as a personality, as a person, as me, in my case, this guy. But how did this all come about? Causes and conditions. Your mom, your dad got together at a certain time, created this situation, and then they'll take credit for it. This is my child, my baby. We're very quick to take ownership of something that we only had a little bit of say-so about, and make a big deal out of it, and even fight over it. It's amazing. So in a community, a meditation community, a sangha, my sangha, your sangha, the Mahasangha, the great worldwide sangha, from the point of view of someone who is realized, there isn't anyone who isn't sangha. Everyone, there's just human beings, living beings for that matter. So, pardon me. The kind of difficulty or abrasiveness or confusion or antagonism that we get when we're meeting with our biological family or our community has a different kind of tone to it, because the understanding, the basic understanding of the family, your brother, your sister, your dad, your mom, that are not practitioners, or the community, your neighbor, co-workers and so on. It's not that they aren't genuine, or it's not that they aren't real. It's not that they don't have emotions and feelings, or that their ideas and so on don't count. It's just that they're operating out of an uninspected belief that they're a solid, separate being. Whereas as a meditator, if you've been doing this for a while, and if you've been studying these teachings and you're drawn to this, something about this material seems to be important to look deeply into, then you're not, the downside, the feeling is not being so sure, and the upside is not being so sure, because that's a very good opening for that to start to open up for you to see that the actual responsibility for something is not all that clear. Actually, this is why the teachings of the Buddha's teachings say all dharmas are without blame, or that there's no actual, you can't actually find first cause anywhere. You might say he ran a stoplight and you ran into him, so therefore he's to blame. You can do those kind of things, but the fundamental situation is pretty difficult to find because it's dependently arisen. What was happening when the person actually was distracted, or what they'd just been through with their spouse 15 minutes earlier that brought about that situation. That's never looked at. The governments and people who are in control or think they're in control or want to be in control do not want too much information. They want it simple, cut and dried. This is what the court system is about. You have to have facts, or this happened and that happened and you did this and you did this, so therefore you did this, so we're going to punish you, fine you, whatever. So it's a very simple, I think that's kind of narrow, you can't see anything else but just that. When you're working with your family situation, it has a similar kind of tone to it, in that the preconceptions are unexamined. It's just, we even, in a conversation, we even swap opinions as if there's some kind of value to an opinion. Not much. We swap those trade-off. And so what I'm trying to, endeavoring to get to here, and what I want to emphasize is the Sangha community, they have their confusion. It can be just as intense, maybe in some cases more intense than the relationship to your brother, your sister, your mom, your neighbor. But the powerful thing about that, if you continue to do that, is that person who you're in the community, the Sangha, the meditation community with, that person's actually endeavoring, their intention is to see who they want to know the fundamental truth about themselves, about their suffering, about their discontent, about their difficulty with whatever it can be, anger. Some people have anger. Some people just have irritation come out of nowhere. Sometimes people have depression. Just you're doing fine, everything is going good. You just walked out of the ice cream shop, which would be one of my favorite places to walk into. You just walked out of there, you're feeling pretty good, and then something starts to get really heavy, or you wake up the next morning and you don't know what it is. You want to not look at that. You want to just subtle form, or maybe not so subtle form of ignorance, is just to don't think about it. I'm just not going to think about it. I'm just going to do something else. And that's, I'm not saying that's incorrect. I'm just saying that's a way of handling negativity that is probably is more than likely it will come right back the next day or 3 days. And it might be stronger, it might be weaker, but and then we try to find the reason. Well, it must be because I'm not drinking enough water, or I'm not I need to do other yoga postures, or it could be even I need to meditate more. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that could come up. And the idea, if you're a meditator, if you're sincere about this and you want to understand these teachings, then it seems to be necessary, insofar as you can, to be genuine, to actually stop or at least slow down, trying to get rid of your emotions, trying to be somebody else, somebody who doesn't feel negative, somebody who doesn't have that, somebody, anybody but this guy. And what this practice is saying, be genuine, actually be within the emotions that are rising for you at any given time. Don't object to them, don't agree with them, and don't look away from them. Those are the three poisons again. And the way you can do that is, of course, to help you do that would be a sitting practice of meditation. And then the other way that I've been getting to since this talk began is community, Sangha, other people who are wired differently than you are, different kind of dynamic altogether, but they're also, you may have the same teacher, you may have the same practice space or center or temple, what have you, but bringing that together as so that you're actually interacting as much as possible with other people who are also practicing. That could be more uncomfortable than people who are just hanging out with your friends, because you're meeting people in that area that you might not even be friends with. You might not be friends with because generally people who are friends with are people that they see are foibles, to put the word, use the polite word, and but they love us so much that they're not going to criticize us. They just really like us. They like being around us. They like our energy. We're just tuned in. You know, you're both have some chemistry together, synastry, whatever it may be, whatever one of those words would work. And so you can see that they have their different. You can see that they're not always looking at their issues straight on, but we like them. We care about them. Whereas someone else could have other situations, but because it just gets very complicated. There's so many variables that are going on there. And what I'm here to recommend is that you, insofar as you can, if this is a path for you, if this is something you're doing, and everyone does this in a different way. Some people could become fully ordained. Some people, that's never going to happen. And so it's up to you how that works. I'm not saying I don't have ideas that show up about people that do whatever they're doing. Of course I do. But they're not necessarily, I don't have a corner on the truth about anything. And yes.
I was just wondering is there something that the Sangha can show you that the teacher can't, or?
Very good question. They can. The teacher, then you have your chemistry with that person, and that person, if they're functioning as a teacher, probably have some clarity around this that you don't, and so they may be able to give you feedback about working with your mind. You come in and ask direct questions. I'm having difficulty with anger, or it's coming out of nowhere. It could be something, or I'm feeling very depressed. And the teaching, that teacher may be able to, and this is something that happens as a teacher, that happens in relationship to people, at quite very varied things that happen. They're just no two alike. And so, but I can only do so much. It's just the nature of the situation. The teacher-student, teacher can't follow you around all the time. But the working with the community, with the Sangha, like just the sutras that we did in here this morning, that's really, really important, to do something with the community. And that's not only that, but then the studying. Sometimes we look at all the different things we study, and it's about the study. It's about the Dharma, what we study. It's also about the community. It's about sitting down with a group of people, taking out some especially classic texts like the Lankavatara Sutra, and looking at that and reading a little bit with others, and then interacting with other people around that material. That really was extremely helpful to me. I easily spent 30 years doing that. I never functioned like this at all. I didn't start doing this till around 10, 11, 12 years ago. Before then, I was just in a study group. I was a meditation instructor. I would sit down with somebody and say, "This is how you meditate." It takes about 10 minutes. That's the last. I might never meet with that person again. But yes.
So when you're talking about spending time with Sangha, I'm wondering if you could talk about context, as like, is it enough to just kind of do the forms and practices with other practitioners, or is there anything more that seems important?
Well, I think the study is good because then you're actually talking. I think working with communicating, cooperating, collaborating is the 3 C's that I got from somewhere. I don't know where they came from, but they're good. Communicate. Somebody needs to vacuum the Zendo. Cooperate. Here, come here. I'll show you where the vacuum cleaner's kept. Oh, by the way, this is how you put the bags in. You know, I mean, things like very simple kind of interaction with people. Those areas are very important, and I think you know that's something you're doing all the time. And then and working with the way people function, especially for people who are temple residents, get a really strong dose of this Sangha part of it. And apparently they want it because people come here and they want to live in this, and this is not particularly an easy place to live for those of you who live here, because you know you have to, if you're not at a particular forum, then you need to say why, either to the Ino or to me, or possibly both, depending on what it is. It's not that I rarely say to anybody they can't do something. I mean, I might advise against it. Say I'm going skydiving tomorrow, and I say, "Are you going with Michelle?" She's probably got hundreds of jumps. You know, I mean, I'm just saying I'd be interested in it, but I wouldn't necessarily. Are you sure you want to do that? You know, it might be that, but I wouldn't stop some, even though they were doing that instead of practicing. So it's about the communication, my friends. It's the communication that's important. It's not who controls who or what happens. Yes.
Just about that, sometimes some of the difficulty that arises seems to be around authority and communication. And I was wondering if you could explain what authority is, particularly in the context of a Sangha.
My intention, and it might be that clear to all of you, or to anyone who's listening, is my intention is to help you get your own authority. I don't want to be your authority. I don't want to tell you what to do. I don't. So to see what authority is, and this might be difficult to hear this, but this actually there isn't any authority. But what there is a powerful intelligence that belongs to no one. I'm not being all mystical about this because it's not mystical. It's apparent. It's completely there, but you have to see it. You have to understand it. Otherwise, you, me, somebody will continue to meddle with things based on wanting to control an outcome. Wanting to control an outcome is a really powerful misunderstanding of what this whole thing called being a living being is about. It's completely about awareness. If the awareness is powerful, then what needs to occur, what needs to be held up, and what needs to be pushed down will happen, and you will do that without thinking about it. And the same goes for operating with the Sangha. You'll watch what happens, and you may come in and say, "Don't do that." I mean, I may do that as a teacher, as a head monk here in the monastery. You may say, "Don't do that." But if it's coming out of some kind of thought process to control somebody, then that's kind of a misunderstanding of it. More?
I'm wondering about, there's situations where we just don't want to work with somebody or something like, no, I'm not going to. How do you see the difference between that and seeing that it might actually not be helpful for you to engage in a particular situation?
Say more.
If I hated Shoka,
which you do,
and I just said, "Oh, I just don't want to work with him. I won't. He's too difficult."
Which is.
And I'm just wondering about the other aspect of that. Could be maybe there would be something fundamentally not helpful if I were to interact with him.
That could come up. Certainly. I mean, there isn't anything that you couldn't come up with an idea about it. It could possibly happen. But the idea is that it happens with the situation. So there's some kind of communication, cooperation around it. If I see things the things are functioning and they're working, then I'm staying out of there. I don't want to be. It's not necessary for me to be. This is where I need to be most of the time. But as far as coming in and interacting, I don't think there's any way you can think of ahead of time how to make it so that it'll be safe to do that. It's always going to be kind of an open dimension where, and when it's an open dimension, egos get worried. Self-centeredness, you're right. The fictitious identity that you think is you starts to either get irritated or get threatened or get not respected, or I mean, you could go on and on about that. Shoto, do you have something?
You said you don't want to be our authority. You want to help us find our own authority. How can we work with the teacher-student form, without relying on you being our authority?
Well, you might have to for a while. I leave that up to you to do. How much do you need of that situation? But if there's not. It's difficult to put to say because there. I have ideas about what's happening with you or with anyone here, but I also know better than to necessarily interfere with that. So people need to be genuine. If you're not going to find out what this is and what this is if you're just following orders around. Yeah.
I had a question about Sangha. It seems more simple to see like the book study as something that's a practice that we're encouraged to do with Sangha. But when you implement or help us with things like the window business, it can be difficult to go into that with that same energy. I'm wondering, how can we encourage ourselves to view that as a practice and not shut down on it?
Yeah, I think you've said it. That's you're already doing it. If you're able to describe it in that way, then you're already doing it. It's kind of a process rather than a result. So it's just a process. Kevin,
what was the idea that you expressed? Something intelligence. You said
intelligence doesn't belong to anyone.
There was a specific concept that I can't remember the word you put in front of intelligence, describing how it doesn't belong to anybody. It's.
I don't know.
Did describe get it?
She writes everything down.
Well, not everything.
You missed that, Munoz?
Oh my.
Okay, well,
yeah.
Maybe we'll come up again. The other question I was curious about is along the lines of Chazon's question and helpfulness. How do we, if at all possible, gauge what is helpful?
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, and the way I respond to that just constantly is don't do anything unless you have to. One of the ways you can gauge that, you can gauge, not engage, but gauge that is hold back, and watch what's developing. A lot of times the need, the desire, the wish, or even the fear, I have to do something. If you hear a little lecture on your shoulder saying, you better put it in gear, buddy. You got to get this here. This got to happen. You got to do something about this. If you hear that kind of lecture, don't ignore them. Don't agree with them, and don't look away. Well, listen, but don't operate out of that kind of fear, impulsiveness. Just wait. Hold your seat. It's like in the doctor's office. You can't do anything until the nurse comes in and say, "Doctor, I'll see you now." And you really can't. It's that kind of a thing. Even though you're the one who's probably going to say, "The doctor will see me now," but you could wait until the causes and conditions that are rising as two things: your thought patterns and so-called outward circumstances start to resonate with each other. It's like striking that drum, and nothing happens, and then at some point that window over here rattles because it's just because of the nature of physical reality. There are times when the window rattles. I'm not sure I can explain that, but it's that kind of a thing. So I think it's more about, the fancy word is patience, but patience is not something you do. It's something you are, and you wouldn't. It's not a credential. You just and it's not like a waiting for something. It's you're just where you're at. Your heart is beating. You're breathing. Your toes wiggling. There's a mouse running across the room. There's always something going on somewhere. It might not be the thing that you're all focused on, like, I gotta get this done, or I have to, why don't they? Where are they? those kind of little conversations we have with ourselves. So hold your seat. This is what we're learning to do by sitting down facing a wall over and over and over, repetition, is to see that this situation and the situation of running around, doing this, doing that, pushing on that, finding the vacuum cleaner, being irritated because somebody didn't show up to, which is what you run into, is somebody said they'll do something and then they don't do it. And then, it's like anything when somebody's made an agreement, and then we're dealing with that. The idea is that at some point, meditation practice, the awareness practice and your everyday practice, the boundary between those two, they look really different for a long time. At some point, they're this doesn't mean you're going around, don't misunderstand, you're going around feeling all blissed out all the time because your meditation practice and your everyday post-meditation are no longer separate. It could mean that you're feeling like shit all the time, my friends. If you don't understand me, you should ask questions about it. That's how we go deeper into it, or not.
Is there a relationship between control and authority?
Well, as I think I said, there really isn't an authority, and somebody wanting to control is something they might not be thinking of themselves as authority. They might have another little script that back there saying, well, you got to do something about it. Somebody's got to look. It's out of control. We got to get in and control that. And it's not that we don't need to do this or put out the forest fire, but it's a very situational situation that we really begin to see it, that it's actually what it is, not what we think it is. This is the thing that happens with us, especially in interaction with people, is we have an idea about what's happening with the person that is not really being respectful to the person. We have our idea about what they're doing. They're doing this, and we think they're doing this. I'm sure you all experience that somewhat. Just being alive, you're going to have people treat you like somebody that you're not, or you might, because of your heart palpitations, you might jump on somebody because of something you think is happening with them, and then they say, oh, no, I'm doing this, and you say, oh, I see, well, I'm sorry about that, I got carried away or whatever. So those things happen quite a bit, and when somebody is a meditator, they do several things. One of the things they can increase, they can get stronger because of the difficulty that comes from starting to look in a direction that the ego does not want you to look. We want to just go around and be who we are, and just deal with things, and emotions are kind of things. It'll go away, or we can just relax, have a beer, and maybe that will work. Maybe you never will become a meditator. Or maybe you'll meditate just a little bit. So, yes.
Is the Sangha a place where you can practice non-judgment?
Yeah, it's also a place where you can judge everybody. Why not? It's not about getting rid of judgment. I don't really teach practicing non-judgment. I don't know if I say that. Do I say don't judge? Do I say that? Well, I might once in a while. If you're judging me, then I'm probably going to say, please don't judge me. So the whole judging idea is, the difficulty with judging is it's always partial. You have some evidence, just like if this person hits that person, so they're to blame. Simple. Lock them up, get them for assault or whatever. So that's obvious. The government wants it that way so that they can do something with it. They can operate. So they have a culprit, and we have a perpetrator and a victim. So okay, got it, cut and dried. That's it. But they don't go. It doesn't look any deeper into why that person hit that person, or what the other person did, and all the other causes and conditions that go back, including. And I'll say this without any particular explanation, unless there are questions around it, including in what looks like past lives. That's an area that generally the society does not look at all, because they want proof for everything, and that's a really difficult one to prove. You might as well be trying to prove future lives, which could also be happening.
How can Sangha take us deeper into the open dimension?
So just because if you're practicing what you practice here all the time, so you probably have a good idea of that. Because your own style, you rub up against people that you may not like, or people that may not like you. They just don't resonate with you, or you don't resonate with them. It's somebody that outside of here you probably would not be friends with. So I'm not saying that's true in all cases, but so you're with somebody who is trying to train their mind. You're trying to train your mind and trying to understand what this is and what your suffering is about. And you're endeavoring, if you're Sonoraksu, which you have, why aren't you wearing it? Don't know?
I don't know.
Okay. So, what was the question?
How does Sangha take us deeper into the open dimension?
Yeah. I don't know, maybe it won't. But it will help you to see the way in which you're preventing your own, because it's like a mirror. It's the teacher functions as a mirror. The Sangha functions as a kind of a microcosm of all the world. Just interacting with people who are practicing and are endeavoring to train their mind, talking about the Dharma, talking about a particular aspect of the Dharma, listening to the way another person who's a practitioner, and comes here and studies, listen to they understand something completely differently than the way you do. So,
what is it about the interaction that takes us in the open dimension to a course of action coming up?
It's getting pretty abstract there. It's like, what is it that actually causes you to buy wingtips instead of loafers?
Style.
Huh? Style.
To be posh.
Yeah. Took the words right out of my frontal lobe.
Port out, starboard high.
Huh?
That's what it stood for.
It did?
Yeah. That's where the posh would stay.
I didn't know that.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yes,
so if we're in the doctor's office and waiting, and
yes,
there's no way to know when the nurse is going to come in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So there, when I say there isn't anything else, I'm saying, of course, there's something else, and then the nurse comes in. So things do change. But one thing doesn't really lead to another in the way that our self-centered ego mind thinks it does, and this is why we get frustrated when we've totally ignored our kneecaps, we've totally ignored the color of the carpeting, we totally ignored the cardinal outside the window. We're totally ignoring everything, and just to focus on where in the hell is the nurse at? I've been here. My appointment was for 3:30, and it's 10 to 4 already. Sorry, that's a very, very scary face. It scares me if I do that in the mirror. I go, whoa! Don't look at that. Yes, it's time to now do the daily Dharma gathering. I don't know what the title is about. You?
Unconditional confidence.
Okay. So if you can stay for that, please stay.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our yellow chant books. And I'd like to call your attention to the donation boxes that are still in the hallway, ready to receive your financial help if you value these teachings and this environment. Thank you.
May merit this penetrating to all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-ho-san shi-shi-fu, shi-son-bu-sa-mo-ko-sa, directions, the three worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who's unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.